Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to In the Zone TV. I'm your special host, Edward Preston, talking with Eric Shine. He is the host and producer of In the Zone TV. And we were talking earlier, Eric, about whistleblowing in America and how that impacts the merchant Marines, and in particular your situation. Now, tell us how that significantly can be illustrated with your specific case that you've been going against the merchant Marines, or actually they've been prosecuting you with.
Well, before going into that, I think people don't understand that much about the United States Merchant Marine. So it requires a little bit of an explanation, not only about what it is, how it functions, but how important it is to national sovereignty, national security, even civil defense. Because what's going on now is they're trying to break down our cabotage laws, and you can look that up on Google and check into what those are. But those go
Spell
in.
it.
I think it's CABOTOGE, I believe, but you'll have to double check it. It's been a while. But those are the laws that protect our waterborne commerce. Like even to the point of where you can't have foreign ships going up the Mississippi. Right now there's a tax upon the St. Lawrence Seaway to privatize it as the public trust that it is, that we've all have a leg in on, or a part of, as a part of the Commonwealth of the United States, to China, to where China would own and control the St. Lawrence Seaway, much like they own the Panama Canal now, much like they tried to get a hold of Long Beach Naval Shipyard under Clinton, much like most of our shipyards are now, like Kvarner owns and controls what used to be Philly Shipyard. The Long Beach Naval Shipyard here has been shut down. It was a public yard, much like what happened with Hawaii. All the public yards have been shut down. The Navy is now outsourcing to private contractors that many of these individuals have a leg in on in foreign countries, and are able to funnel money, because much of the repair, even on naval vessels, let alone any construction on commercial vessels, American flag, which we have very few of, is being carried on overseas in foreign ports and in foreign shipyards that are under foreign ownership. But the merchant marine is so very important. It goes towards the fisheries, our tuna fleet, and more. You've seen what's happened with our tuna fleet and our tuna canneries back in the 1970s and even 80s. Most of it's now down in Samoa, and most of that has been outflagged or outsourced. But the merchant marine goes into container ships, oil tankers, liquefied natural gas carriers, which is a huge move right now to bring liquefied natural gas, or even build up in Malibu. There's a new terminal that they want to build, 300 feet wide, I believe, 14 stories tall. That's going to just obscure the coastline. And as far as when you look into what happens when a liquefied natural gas carrier blows because of a catastrophic event, it wipes out a city. I mean, it's happened, I think, once or twice around the world, maybe more than that, but I think it's only been once or twice. But we used to manage and own and control that entire fleet. Energy Transport Corporation was one of those corporations that did this. They had a fleet of 9 to 11 LNGs. That has all been outsourced. The North Slope oil has been outsourced, and even the oil tankers that carry that oil have been reflagged. CSX, which gets into the Dubai ports deal, and even Halliburton moving to Dubai now, they had control of various ports and railroads. And you start to see is what they've done is they've taken all of these enormous public trusts that are tied to shipping. We had shipping before we had railroads. We had shipping and ships before we had interstate or intrastate highway system or roads. And the majority of all cargo, not just in wartime, like what's going in Iraq and soon to be Iran, it appears, goes by ship. And what's happened here in the United States now is that 97% of all our cargo is now carried on foreign flag vessels under foreign control, under foreign laws, rules, and regulations that we have no oversight over whatsoever. But then you look even deeper, and the Coast Guard has been, playing a big part in what's going on, and even in my own situation. And they're coming after and attacking American federal maritime officers and seamen to the point now where, again, we have 97% of the cargo carried by foreign flag vessels. But you also look into that all of the cargo that comes into the United States, only 1% or less is actually inspected. So you realize that our merchant fleet was set up to be under American flag, under American controlled, American manned, even built in America, these ships, at least a majority stake, 51% or more, not only to protect our ports, but to protect our cargo and our international rights of way. Because when we keep that cargo in our custody for the longest period of time, it makes us that much more safe. Because when you have a foreign flag vessel coming into the United States, and if it has a strategic nuke on it, or any type of a bioweapon, or a bioweapon can be like Typhoid Mary. It can be that simple. Put in a container, a sex slave that they're bringing in, and this happens a lot, small arms from China and more, that when we don't have control of that, when we don't have our federal maritime officers on board these ships under our flag, under our control, we are that much more vulnerable to mafia influence, organized crime, white-collar crime, terrorists, whether they're domestic terrorists like Timothy McVeigh, or foreign terrorists like Al-Qaeda, bin Laden, and you look deeper into that and you realize too, we talked about even as whistleblowers, Gary Webb, he uncovered much of what was going on with the CIA and drug trafficking and crack cocaine. He's now dead, either by his own hand or by extreme oppression and prejudice on the part of the United States and corporations. But he uncovered a little tidbit of where these companies like Chiquita's been in the news recently, and that used to be United Fruit. They used to set up banana republics down in South America. These corporations, big corporations, are using the government, big government, to step on the little guy, and no longer overseas in Central America, South America, the Middle East, and even throughout Europe. We play a lot of games and have been playing a lot of games, but to the point where now all of this, in a form of blowback, a perverse form of blowback, has come back upon the American people, and that everything that our government and these big corporations have been doing overseas, Bhopal, India, you can look towards, that was 3M, right, I believe, and what happened there, and what's happened to those people after that. The very same thing is going on here, and it's increasing at an exponential rate, that if we do not seize control of our own government again, like we had back hopefully in the late 1700s, and even people have said in the 1970s, we are not only going to be deep within World War because of what's going on with Iran, but everything. We will be living in a military police state here in the United States, if not abroad. And you can see all these signs, like integrated Coast Guard systems. Admiral Loy has a leg on this. He was the former U.S. Coast Guard Commandant. He retired, took over the TSA as it became the Transportation Security Administration, transformed from the Transportation Safety Administration. And you can see that these corporatist, globalist, industrialist, fascist individuals are being placed and taking over to the point, like even out here in LA, the LA Unified School District has been, they've appointed this retired admiral, I believe he came from Military Sealift Command, retired, federal position, military, and now he's in charge as superintendent of the second largest school district in the nation, if not the world. And so you see this move towards militarism.
If we're not hearing from mainstream media on all these topics that you're bringing up, then it's very important that we have the whistleblowers protected, like yourself, who have taken upon themselves to take the chance to get that information out to the public. What should we be doing, if we're not doing it already, to help whistleblowers like yourself to continue to do the right thing?
Congressional hearings. Right now, with the gravity and level of what's going on, there's very few people that can explain. I have a $180,000 education all paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. Naval Commission, top secret security clearance. I've worked for GE. I've worked at Pearl Harbor for the Navy as a federal contractor. I've also worked in San Diego at the sub base as a civil service or public servant, GS 1213, as a port engineer for the Navy down in, and it was actually Transportation Command, Naval Fleet Auxiliary Force and Military Sea Lift Command. I've been throughout and seen on both sides of the fence what's going on, and it's literally, it's the taking down or destruction of those core systems of due process, our democratic institutions, whether they be arbitration, grievance processes, Merit Systems Protection Board, Licensed Personnel Board, our courts. Our courts are being fortified and shut down. They're actually privatizing the courts, firing clerks, and hiring private clerks or contracted clerks who will, to survive, do anything that they're told to a large extent, and to the point where not only are they fortifying the courts, but even the U.S. Marshals Service is subcontracting to where they have private contractors who work for the U.S. Marshals who are keeping complainants and grievance out of the court system.
Well, when you're addressing the element of preventing grievances and complaints from entering into the court system, they're trying to prevent a precedence from legally being established in the court. So what they're doing is outsourcing to these arbitration services that to me appear to be rather slighted towards representing the clients that they usually deal with,
well, they know who pays
corporate
their,
America,
right,
not the individual that is going up against the corporation, which is basically a fly-by-night, flash in the pan. It's not going to be somebody that they're going to continue to see day in and day out in their arbitration
But it's
sessions.
actually worse than that, because what they're doing, and the courts are moving in this direction too, to the point where the courts don't want to do their job, and many of these individuals who are being appointed as judges are actual executive officers who are constitutionally incapable of making a judicial decision because they just weren't brought up that way. And this goes into separation of powers issues and more, that they're taking people not only from government side to corporate to government. They're taking them between the different branches from legislative, executive, judicial. They're taking executive officers from the corporation or from the executive branch and making them judges. They don't have not only the interest but the inclination to sit outside and hear grievances and make sure that evidence is brought in, that people get a chance for a proper hearing, evidentiary hearings and more. They're actually going after and trying to help the bigger party injure the little guy, to the point where it's big government, big corporation working together, protection, indemnity, insurance clubs. This whole issue we brought up on the other program involving whistleblowers about Specialist Town, you know, they're lying, cheating, and stealing to the point that it's gotten so egregious that the only way to cover it up is to launch us into another war in Iran and possibly world war, so that they can do the very same thing here at home that was carried out under McCarthy, or the Red Purge under Stalin, and to the point where they're attacking all of the intelligentsia, all intellectuals, making them the injured and or infirm. And then what they're going to do, just like in Nazi Germany, is go after the injured or infirm to wipe out the injured and infirm who they feel are defective, much like in, you know, Specialist Town's case, and also wipe out all the intellectuals.
Well, as Bush said, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Right.
You're
You're with the
terrorists.
terrorists, right.
Right.
And they see anybody who files a complaint, anyone who is a dissident, anyone who has a voice, not only for themselves but for others, as a terrorist of sorts, because you're laying claim against these enormous collectives or combines or programs that they have a vested interest in.
And how do they undermine you then? They attempt to disqualify your credibility. How do they attempt to discredit you? On what levels are they?
Well, even in Specialist Town's incident, and I ask and I beg that people get a hold of this individual, find out where he's at, and the people at Walter Reed, and I think Randy Rhodes from Air America and others have come forward with it, and it was a great idea. It was a caller that brought this up about find out where, like say California, find out all the soldiers who are either born and raised here or who lived here and were, you know, brought into the military or sent out of here, you know, into the military. Find out who they are, where they are, talk to their families, and lay claim back to our own Californians, whether they've, you know, come into the state or whether they're born and raised here or not. They're still Californians, and protect these people, protect the, not only the, like even the U.S. attorneys, and some of these people, you know, Carol C. Lamb, her leg, she has a leg in on my own stuff, but I believe it's more Timothy Stutler, who's her assistant, who I believe has taken over her position, but she filed a motion in my own circumstances saying that executive, because this isn't about me, and that's what I need to make very clear, and that's why I bring up the issues in my own circumstance, but I'm trying to make it clear they're going to use this against you. They're going to use this precedence.
People have to realize that these are all test cases, and they're using people like guinea pigs. And you think
Tuskegee.
you think that, well, that's those people. Well, once they've finished establishing a precedence with these individuals, then they will then start to employ it or apply it across the board to everybody. And so as Reverend Niemöller
Pastor Dr. Martin Niemöller, he's a Presbyterian pastor. I believe I've seen
World War II, right?
Right, and I've seen there these Methodists, but I believe he is Presbyterian or was. He said, first they came for the Social Democrats, which you can see what's going on. I was a Republican. I went to a military academy, Naval Commission, and more. First they came for the Social Democrats, and I was not one, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the Catholics, and I wasn't a Catholic, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the gypsies, and I wasn't a gypsy, so I didn't say anything. And then for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. And then finally, they came for him, and there was no one left to say anything. And that's exactly where we find ourselves, that people need to realize that it's not about Christian or Jew or Muslim. I mean, even in the prison and labor death camps, and this is in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, they used to call the prisoners, they used to actually call the dead bodies in the prison labor camps Muslims. The spelling's a little bit different. It's not M-U-S-L-I-M-S, it's actually M-O-S-L-E-M-S. But we've talked about the use of language and how something, when it sounds similar, people can't necessarily distinguish. You know how much of a problem people have with spelling, words that are same or similar.
It's all about labeling, mislabeling, misinforming, misdirecting.
Lying, cheating, and stealing.
Disinformation, misinformation. This is a constant process that has been used since the beginning of time. And when you're talking about that in Reverend Niemöller's statement that he made, it's about divide and conquer.
It is.
Because there is no unity. It's all about division. And so you can simply categorize people so that they are distant from each other, and they're pushing each other out there to the front. Take them first. Take them first, not me.
They don't want you to have a happy family or a happy marriage.
Eventually, they run out of people to take, and then you're next. And that's what most people don't feel that is a reality, because it has not hit their doorstep. But as we were speaking the other day,
people are, but they just don't realize
things are happening to you indirectly. It's not direct, it's indirect, and it is happening, and it is affecting you. You just don't see it because it's done so cleverly.
Well, and Carol C. Lamb, in my own situation, or Timothy Stutler more specifically, they filed a motion, and this is not about me, that said that administrative law judges from the executive branch have qualified judicial immunity. They're not. They're not judicial officers. This goes into the whole unitary government thing. This goes into, they even declared that at some point these administrative law judges from the executive branch, it goes into Military Commissions Act and more, have sovereign immunity. And you start to realize that, how could a U.S. attorney, this came under her name, and I believe that Timothy Stutler was more involved in it, but it came out under her name, and she's supposed to do something about it. Whether she's directly involved or not, her name's on it. She's one of the 8 U.S. attorneys that's been recently fired. There's a heck of a lot more going on, and we need open, honest, immediate investigations, if not impeachment.
Well, briefly on that subject of these individuals getting fired, attorney generals, they're starting to of course, eliminate these individuals that were bringing attention to Republicans, predominantly Democrats, that they went after for improprieties,
investigations,
and other issues as far as investigations. And the percentages, if you see the small amount of Republicans compared to that of Democrats, well, that small percentage of Republicans was enough to set the Bush administration off to say, hey, don't go after our guys. But the reality is, people, they're both their guys. These are two divisions of
Of
the
the
same
war party,
corporation.
of the war
okay?
party.
Democrats, Republicans, they are one in the same, just different names. It's a clever disguise, so that way you think you go to the Democratic Party and you complain to them that they'll do something for you. Or you run to the left or you run to the right. And it's this left-right paradigm, once again, dividing people instead of uniting us.
Oh yeah, no, and Bush has said himself, and everything he says, you have to take 180 degrees out. He said, I'm not a divider, I'm a uniter.
Yeah, well,
He's not. He is a divider.
He uses reverse psychology,
Right.
and another clever
Lies.
technique that they tell him, I'm sure, is to speak in the second person. It's not you. You're not speaking about yourself. Project it onto the other person, but just change the reference. So that way, when you're saying that those people, you're actually talking about yourself.
Well, they're talking about Iran attacking us. Right. And it's like, we're attacking Iran. We're setting everything up, just like we did with Iraq, to be able to launch an imperial attack upon Iran. But people need to be very clear. This is not about Iran. This is about our country, to where they're using it to dissolve our country.
It should be our country. It's not our country. It's the U.S. government using our resources to promote their agendas, which are hidden.
I'd still like to say it's our country, and many people believe that.
We need to take control back of our country.
But the point is that they're trying to dissolve the country from within, both public and private, and move it into this North American Union, carry on a change in title, so that everything about, or that used to be the United States, whether it's Mount Rushmore, Yosemite, Yellowstone, our bridges, interstate highway systems, and more, lumber, steel, coal, have all been handed over to private interests. And there is no more public government, there is no more open government, there is no government of, by, and for the people.
There's no transparency.
Exactly.
And there's no accountability. And people don't seem to realize that, because once it becomes privatized, then it's the bottom line is about profit.
And dungeons, and I mean, to the point of kings and queens and guillotines, to where they can do anything to anyone, throw you in prison without due process, seize upon you. And I mean, look at what they're doing in my own situation. United States of America, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, and U.S. Coast Guard, 4 huge departments, I mean the United States itself, 50 states and more, have charged me with being depressed. If they wanted to, they could have accused me of being a witch and proven it, which, you know, to some extent with what's going on with the Military Commissions Act, Inter-Military Commissions Act, which is a new term that I've heard, because you got to remember, I'm not in the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard Vice Commandant Admiral, it's a Vice Commandant Vice Admiral Crea, this woman, she feels, she's reviewed, she's had the documents, she's vacated the order, she feels it's okay to prosecute somebody and bring charges against them for supposedly being depressed. Think about how much that mirrors what went on in Nazi Germany, or even the Soviet Union before its own fall. Yeah, Kafka, the trial.
Basically, you have these trumped up charges. These are fabricated, and it's their bat and ball, and it's their game. And they control everything as far as the rules and how it's played. So if you don't like it, too bad. And that's what they're saying to the American people, is if you don't like it, what are you going to do about it? And that's what we're talking about here.
Well, they're challenging the American people. It's like they've said everything openly, like, you know, they're moving this North American highway, or the NAFTA superhighway, or the it's part of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, the SPP that was signed between Paul Martin, George Bush, and Vicente Fox, and it moves into, and that's why they've not been enforcing the border and more, into this North American Union, much like the European Union, to where we are not independent states anymore. We do not have a constitution. We have no, even the Declaration of Independence has been dissolved. And when you think about the gravity of that and where this is all headed and why, it's about theft on a grand scale of everything and anything about our country, everything in the treasure house of the United States, U.S. Treasury assets and more, and even on the public or the private side, because they're going in and through changes in title in the bankruptcy court and more, transferring enormous wealth, just like they did in World War II, even prior to that during the Great Depression. And war is the greatest mask to piracy, whether it be administrative or overt, like what's gone on even in Iraq itself. You've seen the contracts about how the oil is going to be set up now, and the private interests are going to own and control it. They want to go into, it's worked for Iraq, we're still in there. They don't want to win in Iraq. Even the surge is more about invading Iran.
Yeah, it's escalation. They changed the names, the labels once again, but it's all about escalation. It's to encourage and continue with a long-term agenda. The Project for the New American Century, it's a big new Brzezinski wrote about it, and this is something that even Ted Koppel did a special called Our Children's War. Okay, so this is something that's being projected way down the
Perpetual
road.
war.
This is perpetual war.
And it's a war upon the American people and the working class. And you know, at some point they've got people running around with their heads cut off, not literally, but you know, figuratively speaking, to where they cannot manage their own lives.
They don't have the time or the capacity to even address these other
to think
issues.
of bigger, larger issues, or even fight it. But still, even with that said, and I think everybody's feeling the hurt, and a lot of people don't understand where it's come from. The oil. President Bush has come out and said that $40 billion should be added to the National Strategic Oil Reserve when it's already to capacity or beyond. When you think about that and couple it with gas prices, you understand that he is working with Exxon and others to elevate the price of gasoline and oil and fuel by playing with supply and demand, taking $40 billion off the market. But then you think deeper about what the National Strategic Oil Reserve really is, and this plays into the merchant marine and everything else. It's a huge asset that we have no control over. The Fort Knox, the gold reserve, supposedly 368,000 bars of bullion, it hasn't had an accounting since 1958. We've never had a proper, open, public accounting of the National Strategic Oil Reserve. And when you think about the implications of that, and Iran-Contra, you know, drugs and money and whatever for hostages and, you know, whatever, and the Contras, Negroponte, U.S. ambassador down there, and more, you start to realize that this is a huge slush fund that they've been using to fund black ops and black departments and black agencies from within the government. And many people have talked about, you know, the shadow government, and we need to realize and work.
The shadow government's not so shadowy.
Well, now that shadow's gotten pretty imposing. And
exactly, it's very overtly obvious and right in your face. A shadow is usually behind, but the what the ramifications and the repercussions of everything. Well, you could see when Bush is being interviewed, and this is not, people need to realize, it's not about Bush. This is not about Republicans, about Democrats, Bush administration. This is about a system that is flawed, that this is really our American government, and we need to retake control and gain ownership once again, and that's being done via whistleblowers. So with Eric Schein as producer of In the Zone, I'm your host, special host, Edward Preston, and you're watching In the Zone TV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.